a grieving mother who just buried her little boy Kyler after a horrific accident.
Kyler! Woo! We love you!
5 days. That's how long Kaylynn Davidson had to grieve her 5-year-old son before she was gunned down herself.
Merry Christmas to you. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Period.
5 days between laying her child to rest and becoming a victim of violence that started with angry Facebook posts and ended with bullets. On one side, you have Kaylynn Davidson. On the other, Kimari Wright, a woman whose online attacks would push an already broken family past a breaking point. What began as accusations and insults exchanged through screens escalated into a real-world confrontation that left another child motherless and a community questioning how we treat each other during the darkest moments of human experience. Kyler Davidson died in an accidental shooting. His funeral was held days later, with his mother Kaylynn struggling to hold together what remained of her shattered world. During those same days, while most people would expect sympathy and space to mourn, Kaylynn found herself under attack online. Posts, comments, and accusations flew back and forth between her and Kimari Wright, creating a digital powder keg that was about to explode. But here's what makes this case particularly disturbing. This wasn't about money, drugs, or revenge for some past crime. This was about grief, blame, and the toxic ways social media can amplify our worst impulses when we're already at our lowest point.
So I'm like the silent but deadly weapon. You know what I'm saying? I was gonna be quiet. But then when you get on there and you stay talking about your guns and what you gonna do, where's all the tough talk at? How you talk this tough, but you won't do this? How? How? You won't even do this. The first thing you resort to is your gun. And I understand that, and I couldn't take it no more.
Stay tuned as we reveal everything about this case. Drop a comment and let me know what you think about this story. Welcome to our channel. Please like this video, share and subscribe to this channel to help raise awareness and spread caution. Let's begin.
Oh yeah, so it's always a bitch that don't got they motherfucking kids that be having so much to fucking say. You don't even have your fucking children. Girl, if you only knew, and I'm making this fucking public, never fucking care. If you only knew how many motherfuckers that inbox me, talking about they sick of you, they sick of your dirty ass house, and you posting pictures. Bitch, you don't even got your children, and you speaking on some bitches that take care of their kids.
This is a story of 2 deaths that didn't have to happen, a Facebook feud that cost lives, and a community that learned the hardest possible lesson about what happens when we let our digital demons loose in the real world. It was supposed to be a normal day. Kids playing, families spending time together. The kind of ordinary moment that parents treasure without realizing how precious it is. Kyler was with his 9-year-old cousin when the unthinkable happened. In a split second, childhood curiosity and an accessible firearm created a perfect storm of tragedy. The 9-year-old found a gun and, not understanding the devastating power he held in his small hands, accidentally fired it. The bullet struck Kyler, and despite desperate attempts to save him, the little boy died from his injuries. Just like that, a family's world collapsed. The community rallied around the Davidson family. Initially, there were the usual responses to childhood tragedy. Flowers, cards, casseroles delivered to the door, whispered conversations about how such things happen and what could have been done differently. People genuinely wanted to help, to show support, to somehow ease the unbearable burden of loss that had fallen on this family. But even in those first hours after Kyler's death, there were whispers, questions about supervision, about gun safety, about responsibility. When a child dies accidentally, especially in a shooting, communities often struggle with how to respond. There's genuine sympathy mixed with uncomfortable questions about prevention and blame. Kaylynn threw herself into creating the perfect goodbye for Kyler. She wanted everything to be right, to honor his memory, to show the world how much this little boy meant to his family. The service was held, Tears were shed, and little Kaylynn Davidson was laid to rest with all the love and ceremony his family could provide. For most families, this would mark the beginning of a long, private journey through grief. The casseroles would stop coming, the visitors would return to their own lives, and the hard work of learning to live with loss would begin. But for Kaylynn Davidson, her son's burial wasn't the end of her nightmare. It was just the intermission before an even darker chapter began. In those first days after the funeral, while Kaylynn was trying to figure out how to continue existing in a world without her son, someone was already preparing to attack her publicly online. The grief that should have been protected and respected was about to become ammunition in a social media war that would cost Kaylynn her life. After laying Kaylynn to rest, Kaylynn Davidson did what many grieving parents do. She created a memorial at the site where her son died. This wasn't unusual or inappropriate. Memorial sites at accident locations are common ways for families to process their grief, to have a physical place to visit, to ensure their loved one is remembered exactly where their life ended. The memorial was simple but heartfelt. Flowers, balloons, photos of Kaylynn smiling, small toys that represented the childhood cut short. For Kaylynn, this spot represented more than just where her son died. It was a place where his memory lived on, where she could come feel connected to him, where the community could see that this little boy mattered. But not everyone saw the memorial the same way Kaylynn did.
We love you!
While she viewed it as a sacred space for remembrance and healing, others in the community had different feelings about the constant reminder of the tragedy. Some felt uncomfortable passing by the site daily. Others questioned whether maintaining a roadside memorial was appropriate long-term. Then came the day that changed everything. Kaylynn arrived at the memorial site to find it destroyed. Flowers scattered, photos damaged. The careful arrangement she had created to honor her son's memory reduced to trash and debris. For a mother already drowning in grief, this destruction felt like a second death, a deliberate attack on the only tangible connection she had left to her child. Kaylynn immediately suspected Kimari Wright was responsible for the destruction. Whether this suspicion was based on previous interactions, community gossip, or simply the need to direct her overwhelming pain toward a specific target, she became convinced that Kimari had deliberately attacked her son's memorial. She took to Facebook with her accusations. In posts that mixed heartbreak with fury, she called out Kimari Wright by name, accusing her of destroying the memorial, of showing no respect for a dead child, of adding insult to unbearable injury. The posts were raw, emotional, and public, exactly the kind of content that social media algorithms love to amplify, because it generates engagement. Kimari Wright saw the posts and responded with her own angry messages. She denied destroying the memorial, but didn't stop there. She fired back with personal attacks, with her own version of events, with the kind of escalating rhetoric that turns Facebook comment sections into virtual battlegrounds. What started as Kaylynn's pain over her son's memorial quickly became a public feud with two women trading increasingly harsh words while their communities watched and took sides.
Because she posted it on her page. I shared it. Everybody been on there clowning her and talking about her. And you ain't saying nothing. But you so motherfucking tough. Get the fuck out of here, bitch. You won't even clean your house up. And any nigga that took you anywhere was dusty and nasty just as you. The fuck? Man. Just as trifling as you.
Friends and family members joined in, adding their own comments, sharing the posts, turning private tragedy into public entertainment. For Kaylynn, this wasn't just an online argument. It was a fight for her son's honor, for the right to grieve without being attacked, for basic human decency in the face of unthinkable loss. Every comment from Kimari felt like another assault on Kyler's memory, another injustice piled on top of the ultimate injustice of his death. The Facebook feud was now lit, and both women were about to learn that some fires burn everything they touch. Kaylynn's initial posts about the memorial destruction were filled with raw grief and anger. She wrote about losing her son and then having to watch someone destroy the tribute she had created for him. These posts resonated with other parents in the community who couldn't imagine suffering such a double blow. The comments section filled with supportive messages, angry emojis, and calls for justice. But Kimari Wright wasn't going to let the accusations go unanswered. Her response post denied any involvement in the memorial's destruction and turned the focus to Kaylynn herself. She questioned Kaylynn's parenting, brought up the circumstances of Kyler's death, and suggested that instead of blaming others, Kaylynn should look at her own family's failures. These attacks hit Kaylynn where she was most vulnerable. A grieving mother already torturing herself with what if scenarios and guilt over her son's death now had someone publicly questioning her fitness as a parent.
Oh, yeah. So it's always a bitch that don't got they motherfucking kids that be having so much to fucking say. You don't even have your fucking children. Girl, if you only knew, and I'm making this fucking public, never fucking cared. If you only knew how many motherfuckers that inbox me, talking about they sick of you, they sick of your dirty ass house, and you posting pictures. Bitch, you don't even got your children, and you speaking on some bitches that take care of their kids.
For someone barely holding together after the worst loss imaginable, these words were like physical blows. Kaylynn's post grew increasingly desperate and angry. She wrote about the pain of losing Kyler, about feeling attacked during the worst time of her life, about being denied even the basic courtesy of being allowed to grieve in peace. Her words showed a woman who felt she was fighting for her son's memory against people who wanted to erase him entirely. Kimari's post became more personal and cutting. She attacked Kaylynn's character, questioned her stability, and suggested that anyone who supported Kaylynn was enabling destructive behavior. She positioned herself as a victim of unfair accusations and painted Kaylynn as an unstable woman lashing out at innocent people. The comment sections under each post became virtual war zones. Supporters on both sides traded insults, shared personal information about the opposing family, and made increasingly serious threats. What had started as an argument about a memorial was now touching on everything from parenting skills to personal relationships to financial situations. Have you ever watched an online argument get so heated that you worried it might spill into real life? Maybe it was a neighborhood Facebook group where disputes about parking or noise complaints turned personal. Or perhaps you've seen family drama play out in comment sections where everyone could watch private business become public spectacle. Let me know in the comment about the most intense social media conflicts you've witnessed in your community, because this story shows just how deadly those digital battles can become. For Kaylynn, the Facebook fight wasn't separate from her grief. It was part of it. Every attack from Kimari felt like another way her son was being dishonored, another injustice added to the ultimate injustice of his death. The online conflict was feeding her anger and giving her something to focus on besides the crushing weight of loss. The posts were becoming more specific in their threats, more personal in their attacks, and more public in their reach. Friends were being forced to choose sides. Family members were being dragged into the conflict, and the entire community was watching a private tragedy become a public spectacle. Neither woman seemed to realize that they had crossed a line from which there might be no safe return. The Facebook feud was about to demand payment in blood. The posts had been getting more heated, more personal, and more threatening. What had started as argument about memorial had expanded to attacks on everything from parenting skills to personal character. Both women had said things online that couldn't be unsaid, made accusations that couldn't be taken back, and damaged relationships that couldn't be easily repaired. But Facebook feuds can't stay digital forever when they involve real people living in the same community. Eventually, the women were going to encounter each other in person, and all the anger that had been building online was going to demand real-world expression. When they met in person, all the anger, grief, and rage that had been building through days of online attacks came to a head. Kaylynn was still deep in grief over losing Kyler, still furious about the destroyed memorial, still feeling attacked and defensive about her family's tragedy. Kimari was angry about the public accusations, tired of the ongoing conflict, and determined to end the dispute on her terms. What happened next lasted only minutes, but ended with Kaylynn Davidson dead from gunshot wounds. The woman who had just buried her 5-year-old son was now lying lifeless herself, another victim of a conflict that had spiraled completely out of control. The shooting occurred just 5 days after Kaylynn had laid her son to rest. 5 days between burying her child and becoming a homicide victim herself. 5 days between one family tragedy and another that would leave more children without their mother and a community grappling with how quickly online anger can turn deadly. Emergency responders arrived to find a scene that represented the ultimate failure of human communication and compassion. A grieving mother who should have been surrounded by support and given space to heal was instead lying dead because social media had turned her pain into a weapon that ultimately destroyed her. The news of Kaylynn's death spread quickly through the same social media channels that had fueled the original conflict. People who had been following the Facebook feud, commenting on the posts, and choosing sides suddenly realized they had been watching the build-up to a murder. The online entertainment had become real-world tragedy. The Facebook posts that had seemed so important to both women just days earlier now looked like evidence in a homicide investigation. The angry words, the personal attacks, the threats and counter-threats were all documented proof of how a dispute over a memorial had grown into something that cost Kaylynn her life. The investigation into Kaylynn Davidson's death began immediately, but in many ways, the evidence had been building publicly for days through the Facebook exchanges between her and Kimari Wright. Detectives didn't have to search for motive or piece together the relationship between victim and suspect. It was all documented in social media posts that had been viewed by hundreds of people in the community. Kimari Wright was arrested and charged with murder in connection with Kaylynn's death. The legal proceedings would now determine whether the shooting was premeditated murder, manslaughter, or self-defense. But regardless of specific charges, the fact remained that a Facebook feud had ended with a woman dead just days after burying her child. The Davidson family was now grieving two deaths. First Kyler's accident, and now Kaylynn's murder. Children had lost their mother. Parents had lost their daughter, and a family already devastated by tragedy had suffered another crushing blow. The Wright family was also dealing with consequences, with their relative facing serious criminal charges, and their own family name connected to a highly publicized murder case. The story of Kaylynn Davidson's death just 5 days after burying her 5-year-old son represents one of the most heartbreaking examples of how social media can amplify human tragedy rather than provide the support and healing that grieving families desperately need. 2 lives were lost unnecessarily, first little Kyler in a preventable accident involving an unsecured firearm, and then his mother Kaylynn in a preventable act of violence that grew out of online conflict and community failure to support a family in crisis. Kaylynn Davidson should have been surrounded by support, given space to grieve, and connected with resources to help her process the unimaginable loss of her child. Instead, she found herself defending her family's honor in a public forum that rewarded the most extreme behavior and punished attempts at reconciliation or de-escalation. The community that watched this conflict develop also bears responsibility for its deadly outcome. Every like, share, and inflammatory comment added pressure on both women to continue fighting rather than stepping back and seeking help. The online audience became unwitting participants in a tragedy that might have been prevented with different choices and better support systems. Most importantly, we all need to remember that grief makes people vulnerable in ways that aren't always obvious. When someone is dealing with loss, especially the death of a child, they need compassion, support, and protection rather than conflict and criticism. The way we treat people during their darkest moments reflects our values as a community and as human beings. The memorial that Kaylynn created for Kyler and the conflict that arose around its destruction represents something larger about how we honor the dead and support the living. Respecting others' grief rituals, even when we don't understand them, is basic human decency that costs us nothing, but can mean everything to families struggling with loss. If this story has affected you, if it's made you think about your own social media behavior or your community's response to people in crisis, then perhaps some good can come from these senseless deaths. Kyler and Kaylynn Davidson deserve to be remembered not just as victims of preventable tragedies, but as reminders of our responsibility to treat each other with compassion, especially during the worst moments of human experience. Before you go, I want to hear your thoughts on this case and what lessons we can learn from it. How can communities better support grieving families? What warning signs should we watch for when online conflicts are escalating toward real-world violence? What changes would you like to see in how social media platforms handle disputes that might be becoming dangerous? Hit that like button if this video made you think differently about online conflicts and their potential consequences. Subscribe to True Crime Station for more in-depth analysis of cases that reveal important truths about human behavior and community responsibility. and share this video with others who need to understand how digital disputes can have deadly real-world consequences. Remember, words have power, social media has consequences, and every person dealing with loss deserves better than what Kaylynn Davidson received from her community in her final days. Let's all commit to being part of the solution rather than part of the problem when we encounter others who are struggling with grief, anger, or crisis.